Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited, thrilled to have Joel Theisen with us here today, the founder and CEO of LifeSpark, who is a trained nurse by background, in addition to being an entrepreneur. So, super exciting conversation coming your way, and tons of value. But Joel, thanks for for joining the show, and super excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Kit, man. I love your intro already. The energy's already flowing, so I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Excited to be
no,
here and have a good conversation. So thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
very good. Yeah, well, you usually start with origin story, kind of comic book episode one. Tell us, who you are and how you came to be doing what you're doing now.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, I'll rip for a second.
Yes.
So my origin story, I guess, right? So like you said, I'm a nurse by training, Kip. I grew up in Wisconsin, small town, blue collar, kind of a lumberyard kid. My dad was a lumberman, and so I went to nursing school thinking I was going to go to anesthesia school, right? Because I wanted to get into medicine. I thought about going to
Yes.
medical school. Went into nursing, did my 4 years, went to the Mayo Clinic, was kind of a shoe in to get into the anesthesia program there, which was exciting. And then I quickly realized my first kind of quick realization, and we're like, I don't work well in a sterile, quiet hospital room environment.
Yes.
So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do in my life, right? Kind of the, Dick Bulls, what color's your parachute sort of stuff, right? So I was like, oh man, what am I doing here? I kind of really went towards this goal, and then I'm like, ah. So at the time, I was dating my wife today, my girlfriend. She was
Uh-huh.
in the nursing program, so I had good odds being a male nurse
Okay.
in that program.
Yes.
So that was good for me. And ironically, her stepmother and father were in the home care business, and they were very, very successful here in Minnesota. They had taken a single site home care company to 10 sites, 20 sites, 30 sites, 40 sites,
Oh,
took it public back in the 80s. So they were very successful in this senior space. Here I was, kind of unsure of my future, like a lot of us are at different times in our life.
sure.
And I was like, well, I think I'm going to go back to medical school or go back there and get my MBA. And they were like, no, no, son, you're going to come work for the family business. We'll give you your MBA, little
Yeah,
man.
right.
So, so that's kind of cool. So I'm like, they're like, you can live anywhere you want in the country because they had 42 offices, right? And they were really successful. And I was obviously enamored with their stories. They get great stories.
Yeah.
In fact, my mother-in-law was like, at one time, she was the, entrepreneur of the year in Minnesota and on all the magazines, and very
Wow.
successful, right? So I went to work for them, right? So that was a really pivotal point. Instead of going to medical school or going to MBA school, I went to work for them, and I cut my teeth out in home care or hospice and home care and infusion therapy and that sort of thing. And so I learned sort of the industry, and I was working with them. I'm a grinder, so I work really hard. I'm not the smartest guy out there, but I think I've worked pretty hard, and so I was able to learn and grow and get a lot of benefit from being close to some C-suite people early. That issue around having really smart people around you, having a
Sure.
good posse around you. So that led me to, after about 4 or 5 years, I made my way up into corporate, and I was really eschewing. I was becoming an executive, if you will, and making good things happen. They gave me a $42 million book of business to run, and that was pretty
Wow.
cool. Probably way over my ski tips, right? I probably didn't need that, but I mean it was fun, and I had a lot of pressure and accountability. But then, Kip, the real story is, this is what really started to change it for me, is that I started to realize that what we were doing in home and community-based services, or the industry that we were in, was really not that good, right? I
Mm,
mean, in the sense of the human side of it. I was like, why are we like, because I was what people call the post-acute care services kind of side. And so I'm
okay.
like, why do we even call it post-acute care? Like, it shouldn't be pre-acute. Don't we want to keep people out of harm's way?
Right.
Why are we the tail wagging the dog on acute care? Like, nobody wants acute care, but yet we were the poster, the child down the road with post-acute care, home care, and hospital, these different ancillary services. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this just doesn't make any sense. So maybe my naivety, or maybe my just common sense, was like, we got to do this better. This is just ridiculous, right? And so that's when I said, I just think I can do this better. We need to connect some of these services. We need to commit and connect with these people longer, right? Instead of these episodic short interactions with people. And
Sure.
so in 1996, I said, I'm leaving the corporate bosom,
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna, I had the thing shoot in, and I was like, obviously I could have gone as much as where I wanted to go in that company.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm gonna start my own company. And I remember my mother-in-law telling me, this was a great part, right? She's like, you're crazy. Like, you're crazy. What are you doing? Like, that's dumb. She said, that's dumb. Like, I remember her saying, that's dumb, right? So I'm like, whatever, because wanted to get away from that too, right? Because I didn't want to be
Yes.
under the umbrella. So I said, I'm going to write my own business plan and start my own company. I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was a nurse, right? I mean, I didn't have a clue, but I had a lot of energy. And so I did
Uh-huh.
the research and I was researching in my basement. My wife thought I was a little crazy too. Luckily, she had a job. And so I started writing this business plan around geriatric care coordination or longitudinal care for seniors.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, I came up with a thesis. I had a smart friend of mine that was a Kellogg MBA grad living out in Silicon Valley. And he said, hey, listen, I love your idea. Can I work with you? And can we see if we can get funding? And
Wow.
so I said, I didn't even know what that was. There was no Shark Tank back then, Kip, right?
Right.
It was no Shark
Yes.
Tank, right? So I was like, here I am, like, okay, yeah, let's go see if we can raise venture capital. I didn't even know what the hell I was talking about. And so
Uh-huh.
we went out to Sand Hill Row out in Silicon Valley in Palo
Yeah.
Alto area, and we started doing dog and pony shows with a bunch of different private equity groups. And within 4 months, we had 4 term sheets to do this deal that we were talking about.
Wow.
So I was 26 years old, and we got to pick our investors, and they cut a check for $8.5 million and said, "Come and build it." So my wife sold her house in 3 days. We had a baby, and we had a nice house in Minnesota here, and we sold, and we went sight unseen, go west, my son. So I went out west.
Yeah.
I hadn't even been in Silicon Valley before, right? So we just sold our house, and we thought we were going to get a house out there, and we did the double wide because the expenses
A
were like
little different out
10
in
times, 10 times higher. So again, long story long here, that was kind of the start of it. I built a company that was called First Company. This isn't the company I'm with now, right? Or the
Uh-huh.
company I built here, but it's called Advil Life. Built that company up to 5 locations, was doing really well, making money. It was this kind of coordinated, holistic concierge medicine model for seniors. It was kind of really cool. And my venture guys were really good and all. But what kind of stubbed me there was they wanted to take what I had built and kind of scale that really quickly and do it massively over the market. And I wanted to still, I wasn't done with the thesis, right? I wasn't done with
Okay.
just doing episodic kind of point solution stuff. And so they said, look, we'll give you 50 more million, come and build this really great thing, and you're going to be really rich and all that. And, dumb me, right? I'm like, nah, I think I'm more idealistic than that. I want to do this. And so they're like, well, that's not going to work. And I'm like, well, I want to do that. And this is a little true story. So they actually flew in on their jets and we went to San Francisco the last time. They asked me to do it 100 times, right? And finally they were like, what's going on here? So they flew me in, and I was sitting at a fancy restaurant in San Francisco and with all the investors, me, and they're like, Joel, look, do you understand? Like, look at the spreadsheet here. You're going to be like a multi-millionaire. Let's just do this deal. You're doing great. We love you. You're our guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I get all that. And they're like, but you're saying you don't want to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't see that's the future for me. And they're like, well, are you having troubles at home? Do you have problems, marital problems? They could not get their heads around. They're like, "Are you like psycho? Are you nuts?" So anyway, long story long, that took me back to a. So I said, my wife's wonderful, thank God, right? Because she's
Hmm.
working with a crazy guy, right? So
Yeah.
so we sold that company, right? I helped them sell that company into another company, and my wife said, okay, we're gonna raise the kids back in the Midwest. So we
Yeah.
packed up our bags, packed up the U-Haul, came back to Minnesota in 2004. And I looked at UHC and some other, United Health Group and some other options I had. I'm like, you know what? I'm not done with this, right? I'm just not done with this thesis. And so I said, I don't want venture yet. I want to just really bootstrap this thing because I don't want to lose control. So I bootstrapped it with family and friends money, right? I said, hey, shook the hat, and I raised $500,000, started LifeSpark in
Okay.
2004 with $500,000. And so we
Huh.
went from 500,000, we got our team together, started over, LifeSpark, obviously. And then we went from 2 million to 4 million to 10 million to 20 million to 30 million. And then we got some venture in us, and we have 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, right? So we've been doing that since then. And I still have control and still have the board. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So that's my long journey. Sorry that was a little long there, but hopefully that's interesting on an entrepreneurial journey of taking some interesting twists.
No, that's absolutely. So what when with the original company and they wanted to take it one way and scale it up to 50 million or so, what was the other direct or what direction did they want to go and what direction did you want to go? Or what
Yeah.
was the rub? I mean, if there wasn't
Yeah.
problems at home with the family.
Yeah, the rub was they wanted me to take because at the time in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, in senior services, right? There was a lot of there was a market rate, it's called private duty home care or home care that's market rate, so it's not government,
Okay.
it's really the private pay stuff.
Yes.
And my model was originally built on that because there was no payer for it, right? It was, it was out of pocket, right? To do this kind of longitudinal wellness, well-being kind of model. And they're like, this is really cool. And when I was working with my mother-in-law back and my father-in-law back at the in-home health, the home care company, that I was at $42 million, I was running all the private pay business of the company. So I was really
Okay.
good at the consumer-centric, consumer-focused side. So my venture people, right, my venture team, they wanted me to basically take what I had done in this privatized, private market, private duty market, and go and start doing a lot of acquisitions and buying up the market, right? Which was
Okay.
a good strategy. So they
Right.
wanted me to go out and start buying up all these mom and pops and do all these acquisitions and really roll up the private pay industry
Sure. Okay.
before all the franchise models. There's a lot of franchises in this space right now, especially now in the last 10 years, 20 years, right? But back then it was pretty early and it was pretty opportunistic. So it was a good play. What it didn't do for me and what I wanted to do was I really wanted to solve the human problem. I didn't want to just make money, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, shame on me, right? To not just want to make money. But it was just a matter of if I went that way, I felt I was giving up the innovation and the learning that I had to really connect the dots and integrate different services to create a better experience for seniors.
Sure.
And that is who I am, right? I mean, I have an interest to really make hard problems simple. And this is a hard problem, right? To integrate
Yes.
coordinated care across longitudinal services, and that's what I wanted to do. So that was the rub.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So then it brings us up to LifeSpark. So tell the audience about Life. Well, what is LifeSpark? What do you do now?
Yeah. So LifeSpark again from that 2004 to today, which is now it's 21 years. So I'm a long,
Right. Yes.
I'm not I can't even almost call myself an entrepreneur anymore, right? Because I'm just like I'm sticking to the same thesis for this whole time because I believe in it so much. But we had to start again. We had to have a revenue model. We had to have profitability. I had to build on my own back. So we started with a lot of the traditional services that people in the space or in this industry kind of understand. So there's skilled home health, there's hospice, there's private duty home care, and then we got into the housing. I didn't want to be pigeonholed as a home care company, right? So I
Mm.
wanted to work in be agnostic to environment, right? I didn't want to be pigeonholed at home. I wanted to also work in a assisted living and memory care building. So over the years, we've acquired and adopted a large footprint for working inside of buildings as well. So we work in the
Okay.
community and we work in the home, and we have four businesses that are kind of traditional, which are skilled home health, private duty home health, housing management, and then hospice. Okay, those businesses are all the businesses, if you will, or pieces.
Okay.
Then the override, right, the overlay of LifeSpark, which is really what I've really cared a lot about, is how that all comes together under a different payment schema to really be on the right side of healthcare, right? Because it's
Mm.
not care, it's health, which is
Right.
a funny word because we're mostly sick care. But the
Yes.
thesis of this other business is population health, right? And so that population health business, which where we have our own primary care, so we have our own physicians and our own nurse practitioners that service these people on the medical side, if you will, and then coordinate all these other services around a lifelong relationship with them all the way from when we start to end of life in hospice. So that whole thesis of, hey, we're here to navigate with you and be your trusted relationship through the whole
Mm.
span of your late life is the thesis. And that's what LifeSpark is. We're really, if you want to kind of put it in simple terms, we are a very unique home and community based delivery system, a full delivery system for seniors at home or in housing or community environments.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, so we have multiple payers. So we're agnostic. I like to say we're agnostic to payer. We're being that we take government pay, we take Medicaid, we take Medicare, we take insurance, we take private pay. So all those, we try to compound obviously the thesis around the individual and maximize all their benefits to give them this longitudinal relationship. So we're agnostic to environment. So we service them at home, we service them in communities, we serve wherever they are, right? Wherever they are, except for maybe on the moon, right? If they're in this catchment area, we can service
Mm-hmm.
them. And then we're agnostic to disease. Like we don't care if people they're not heart failure or they're not diabetes or they're not cancer, right? They're humans and they have
Mm-hmm.
human things, all their social issues, all their determinants of social health, all their family, community, that all matters. So we look at all that because that's really a lot of times the driver of challenges for people is all that other stuff. So that all comes into play too. And that's what LifeSpark really is known for is that comprehensive or what we call LifeSpark complete.
Okay. Very good.
And that's what we are. So we're a company that has about 3,500 employees now. We run them, we're about an $80 million company. We're still figuring it out, but we've got a lot figured out, and we're excited about the future.
That's very exciting. Are you across the nation or primarily Minnesota, Midwest, or
Yeah, we're all of our main assets are in Minnesota. We do
okay,
run seven campuses, like assisted living memory care buildings. We manage them in Wisconsin, so we do have
okay,
a little footprint there. But we've really, because the thesis has been so big and challenging, right? So
sure,
we don't want to just go scaling stuff right before it's really sort of built. So we've sort of been in this long sort of like efficacy or figuring out because as
uh-huh,
you're well aware, and the people that are listening, a lot of entrepreneurs out there, you really need to get your business case validated,
mm,
especially these days with the way the market's played. You've got to really have a strong economic validation, predictable model, and so since we've had a lot of architecture to put together, we've just been a little slower to make sure it's sound, right? It is scalable.
yeah, that's amazing. Well, congratulations. We chatted a little bit before we started recording just about culture, and you said you love talking culture, and that's really important. So maybe talk a little bit about the culture, core values of LifeSpark, and how you've built those and how those radiate through the organization.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking that. And again, I know everyone is really, always that's done well is really paid attention to this a lot, right? Because
Yes.
we all know there's nothing about the people. So,
Right.
you know the quotes and stuff. Everybody likes quotes, right? So, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? So I've twisted that my own way. I say culture is our strategy. It doesn't eat
Mm.
anything. It's our strategy. It doesn't eat,
Yes.
it's our strategy. And what I mean by that of it's just the back to that approach that we take as a company, right? That holistic kind of understanding and being empathetic, understanding the unique individual. That's the same thing on the employee level. And if you don't get that right, you don't have any power, right? You can't do anything. Really, in my opinion, you can't do anything meaningful. Because it takes a village and it takes the compounding of human spirit and human minds, hands, hearts, and minds all together. And so for us, culture has always been a really important piece and what's been the draw because the work we do, and sometimes we're not always the best payer, we're not the best, we don't have the most money, right? But what keeps people is the human spirit of us really working towards something really hard that's the right thing to do for people, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when you see the impact that we have on the client level, it's amazing. And then what's amazing for me now, kind of in my seat, is I get to see how that affects the employees, the staff, the pioneers that we have inside, and I love watching the spirit and watching them spark, right? So our company's name is Life Spark. We want to
Uh-huh.
spark our clients, obviously, but it starts with the sparking of our staff and our employees. So we work really hard at it. We have a lot of really cool, innovative sort of like pieces and parts to culture. But we operate on, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's traction, there's
Right.
entrepreneur operating system. We work on traction. We've been working on it for over 10 years. So we really work our culture and are very intentional about our core values, our mission, our vision. And so if you know EOS and that sort of thing, we're really intentional about it. We work hard at it. Um, it's very clear in the organization about where we're trying to go and why.
No, very good. Yeah, we run our company on EOS too and have tons of EOS clients. And I mean, it's amazing how once you implement it, it absolutely transforms the business.
It does. It does. It's one of the things, I mean, no joke, like when, many years ago, right? When before Traction was kind of even like, oh, there's all the implementers. Just when it was the book, when Gino Wickman
Right.
wrote the book, and when it was starting to pitch that idea of like, hey, this is a really good idea. Because before there was a Rockefeller Habits, right? If
Uh-huh.
you know this. And so this whole deal of this idea. So we got on that board really quick, right? We were on that way early, like before it was kind of anything. And so,
Uh-huh.
um, but the idea, to your point of just it was transformational, not because there's lots of ways to organize your structures and such, but
Yeah.
it just created so much clarity for us. And when we
Mm.
were all over, like, what, right? I'm kind of, I'm a wild sort of type A, lots of ideas. It just like
Uh-huh.
really helped us put that into some nice boxes so everybody
Yeah.
could afford. So yeah, that was helpful.
No,
Some
very
good
good.
things. Yeah.
How, just kind of on leadership, how has your personal definition of leadership evolved over time and as the business has grown?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's lots of different ways to take that because it's such a broad, leadership, right? But
Yeah.
I would say for me, when I think about leadership and I think about myself to make it really simple, I think about um, really what I've learned is to be a much better listener, right? And
Mm.
to be really good at empathy. One of my being a nurse and kind of growing up with a lot of nurses and empathetic people, right? I think if
Yes.
you can compound that listening and that empathy, then with understanding to really truly lead is, and obviously there's obviously command and control. We all know there's different types. I've been
Uh-huh.
through all the model. There's command and control. Then there's obviously, supporting and coaching, and there's all sorts of different words we could use, right? But for me, leadership is taking all that learning, right, and really just being simple and listening and being empathetic to first you got to hire the right people and get all the right folks around you. But then when you do, really listen, empathy, and then really support and coach the hell out of it, right? I mean, really make sure that from a leader standpoint, I need to give myself time to be quiet, right? Because my style as a leader is more like, I want to tell, I want to come up with a solution like everybody does. But what I've learned is your point about leadership for me now is about being quiet and listening to the best ideas in the room and then really helping them kind of take up the space, right? And so it's kind of just being a conduit, really. My leadership is to be a conduit to great ideas, great passion, and really the best ideas in the room.
Yeah. No, very good. Any particular like innovative approach or something to, I mean, you talked about listening, but to leadership that's made, significant or unique impact for you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think we talked about it a little bit, but the first thing that comes to mind, Kip, is kind of the EOS sort
Mm.
of work because that drives it drives those teams right together in your L10s, your leadership meetings, and it drives even at the strategy level, it really pushes the team together to crystallize and debate and be transparent about options and then really aligning behind them. So I think the other thing that I guess I would say to your question, what I've learned is if you don't have alignment, right? If you don't have that alignment, good luck, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you have dissonance especially an entrepreneurial organization, right? It's easy to have. There's a lot of debate and dissonance in organizations. There's a lot of chaos in organizations that are even large organizations, quite frankly. But where the power happens when you start to see the real outcomes change and you start to see the jumps in your outcomes is really when that alignment is shared across, and then that force, that whole flywheel effect. If you want to get into like good to great or built to
Uh-huh.
last or some of that stuff, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
obviously cult-like cultures,
Yeah.
first the who, and then you got the flywheel, and so I'm sure sounds like you know what I'm
Yes,
talking about.
absolutely.
So
Yes.
the
No two
flywheel,
thoughts.
right? The flywheel happens on alignment, right? When people aren't pushing
Yeah.
the wrong direction. And so as a leadership, one of the, I think, really important pieces is not to underestimate the need for that continuous as you grow, right? You have new people, new ideas, people have new thoughts, but to keep that alignment as you're going through those transition periods is really important because when they don't, then it really can fracture the company, right? That's when people get at odds and there's camps and there's people making up their own ideas in their own heads. So
Hmm.
I think my quick reaction is really that leadership skill of making sure you have alignment is critical.
Yeah. How about you mentioned a little bit about just like compensation and pay and maybe not being the highest in the industries, but what's been your approach to attracting and retaining like high performance people into LifeSpark and really hiring, we always say A players hire A players.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
been your strategy or
yeah.
approach there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think twofold. I would do it on the actual, economics does matter, money does
Hmm.
matter,
Hmm.
opportunity does matter. I think what has been helpful for me personally, right, is passion, right? I mean,
Mm.
people like passion. They follow those stories like we're doing today, and they follow the fact if it's true, right? People can
Right.
sniff out BS at higher levels, like people know. But
Yeah.
people that have worked with me and know me for a long period of time, they know that I'm all in, man. I mean, so like you heard my story. I walked away twice. I mean, those pivots were
Yes.
my personal story were on purpose to tell you, right? Because I am a believer, right? And I'm a believer in the big stuff. And see, I'm trying to go after Moby Dick, right? I'm trying to go
Yeah.
after the big white whale in this industry, and it's not easy to go after the white whale because like Ahab, you could get eaten, right? And I don't want to
That's
be Ahab,
right.
right?
Yes.
So I think to get people back to your question is you have to have a real clear vision, right? That pulls real talent, right? Because they see, whoa, that's something that's big. That's not me
Yes.
a lot of people we pull from are people from like United Health Group or other places where they've got really great jobs, like they're doing really good things, right? But they want to see that they want to be more involved with something that they can really shape and build into
Yes.
something that hasn't been built. So that opportunity of passion and vision is a big draw. So that's the one part I would say. That draws them in, right? What gets them and keeps them is I've been a big believer in sharing equity,
Mm,
right? So for me, I started because I didn't have all that money, but I do have equity, right? I do have ownership and
yeah.
real ownership, not perceived ownership, but real ownership for most entrepreneurs and most people that have made a lot of money in their life have done it based on obviously stock or
Uh-huh.
obviously equity. So I've been a big believer in sharing that because I don't need to be greedy, right? I didn't grow up greedy. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I didn't grow up with a yacht in my backyard. So what do
Right.
I
Yeah.
need with all that? So the good news is I think it's a sharing and it's open sharing and it's transparency. So that's what we've been able to offer in lieu of, the biggest compensations to go
Yeah.
work at. Again, I don't want to use any, I should probably use UHC, but some of the other some of the other places that can pay a little bit more, right? Because
Right.
they can't, obviously UHC has equity and something you can get it, but
Yeah.
usually you have to go pretty high in the high in the tower. And then obviously if you're working at a hospital or you're working at another institutional nonprofit or something, you got a big salary, right? But
Hmm.
you don't really have a shot at shaping anything. You don't have a shot at really equity.
Yeah. How, other than your mother-in-law saying this is a dumb idea,
Yeah.
how did your in-laws take it when you said, I'm leaving your business and I'm going to go do something else?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, but there's like good luck, right? Like, I mean, they were like negative, right? They wanted me to
Okay.
be successful, but they did like help me. Right? I mean, I never got any money from them. I mean, we don't have any, there's no tie there. Like, so it's
Yeah.
been like, it's been interesting. So that's funny. I mean, I haven't really thought of that. That's the first time I got that question answered, but they were pretty much benign. It was like, okay, go ahead, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's funny because obviously now sitting at the at the Thanksgiving table and talking about it is kind of fun, right? But
For sure.
it's interesting. Sometimes we don't even we don't spend a lot of time kind of divulging going into it for whatever reason we don't. But anyway, yeah,
That's
there's it
funny.
was really no it was no I hope someday it would be interesting. I'd have maybe I'll have to send this to them, but it would be interesting to really get there. I should ask them that question, right, to see how they really feel about it.
Yeah. No, for sure. How about like what future trends, opportunities are you most excited about, as you look out into the future and how are you positioning LifeSpark to capitalize on those?
I think most people know, I mean, whatever industry you're in is whatever, but everybody knows that there's a big baby boom and there's a big populace. The TAM is really big in our industry, right?
Yeah.
The market is really big, obviously. And so I think there's a big trend there, right? And then what do you do with it, right? When you see the degradation in the spend, right? I mean, again, the macroeconomics are amazing, right? Because we just keep spending more money in what we call healthcare. Again, I don't
Right.
call it healthcare, I call it sick care, right? Because it's based on a bunch of things that people don't want, services and things that people wouldn't want in their life, right? You don't want to do surgeries, you don't want new drugs, you don't want, all the sick care stuff, right? I mean, but yeah, we just keep spending the hell out of the money, right? The GDP is, I think we're in healthcare, I think we're about 18% now of
Wow.
GDP is on healthcare, right? In the senior market, again, I'm in the senior space, right? It's about a $1.1 trillion spend, and it's just going up like crazy, right? Because our seniors are getting older, and that baby boom is going to really take off, and the utilization of services and things in a very unproductive and fragmented, siloed method is the current state, right? Everybody's trying to take their rifle shots on how to monetize parts and pieces of the sick care system. And so
Hmm.
for us, it's always been as it still is, right? It's always been this thesis back to when we started was to really how do we really pull that whole thread through that longitudinal relationship, which we think we have. The challenge is how do we monetize that with the market trends and what's happening with payment reform? Because payment, no matter what we all like to say, and again, I'm a little bit on the altruistic side, but not all the, I mean, I'm capitalist too, right?
Uh-huh.
Is like, what makes the world go round is money, right? So if you don't follow the money and the money trends either, you're going to be, out of luck, in my opinion, most of the time. So the trends is really the government is in our markets has tried to take more of a risk-based approach and push a lot of the money into what's called Medicare Advantage to give the payers the opportunity to reframe the provider networks, right? And so there's been some things that have happened where you can actually get paid for population health or wellness. The last couple of years have been really rocky because utilization has been so high, and so it's been a hard thing for the market to contemplate and adjust. But I think the trends for me are still like do right by the client,
Mm.
create value for the client, keep them out of low value, high cost circumstances, right?
Uh-huh.
Has been our thesis all along, and how the payers, being agnostic to payer, how we take advantage of those different payment methodologies is something we continue to work on. But the trend is there because, bottom line is costs are way too high. The
Uh-huh.
outcomes are way too bad, right? And so how in the hell and who's going to fix it, right? And so there's a massive opportunity there to those that really do fix it.
No, for sure. How about what have been some of the biggest challenges you faced over time in building this or the previous business? And then how'd you
Yeah.
overcome those?
Yeah, that's great. I think, up through all the early years for me, I mean, it was pretty, I mean, you had your challenges and starts and fits, right? But it was pretty easy, right? Because I mean, those are all traditional kind of known businesses like home health or hospice or those types of things. So those have been pretty easy. The biggest challenge actually is later in my now kind of in later in my career is like when you start playing with the big boys with the big toys or big girls with the big toys, whatever you want
Uh-huh.
to say, right?
Uh-huh.
There's a lot more risk and a lot more challenges that come into play around the protectionism of the old, right? I mean, I think you might know, or some people might know, I always think of the adoption curve, the adoption, right? Adoption is a really big deal for innovative ideas, and no matter what industry you're in. And so every great idea goes through three sort of like spheres of influence. First, it's the ridicule, like my mother-in-law, that's a dumb
Yeah.
idea,
Yeah.
Joel. How
Right.
would you
Yeah.
do that? That's just stupid, right? So it's just ridicule. Like we've been ridiculed before, so we've got the ridicule. Then you go into the next phase of adoption is violent opposition, right? Like, hey, you're going to take my cheese? Like, no, I don't want you to do that because that's going to take, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
what you're going to build planes, they're going to take cargo. I'm a train guy. No, I don't want that. So I'm going to fight that, right? So,
Yes.
or like in hospitals that take a lot of utilization fees and fee for service, like they want that and they don't want to be on a value-based system that is accountable for overall outcomes, right? Because they're not set up for that. So I think
Right.
violent opposition is really real, right? And the more you go after people's sort of thesis and you take money away from one end to the other, that's really hard. And then finally you get to self-evident where it's like, oh, that was a great idea, Joel. Man, that was the right thing to do. And,
Yes.
oh my God, what a deal, man. Like Amazon and Google and all. Oh, well, no kidding, that was great. Like we would have done that, too. Like Netflix when you talked about Blockbuster, all the stories that people like to talk about, right?
Uh-huh.
Blockbuster, then got eaten up when they were the market leader and IBM and this, so whatever. So that's the thing. So for us, I think the challenge is back to your question for me is uh, is plowing through the storm of the reimbursement has been
Mm.
super hard,
I
right?
can't even
Super hard.
imagine. Yeah.
Super hard because you have big players. Again, there's a lot of national noise around big payers now because of the super crazy and horrific situation at UHC, not, Brian Thompson and
Right.
then all the noise behind it. And it's just unbelievable. But whatever, I'm not going to get political or anything like that. But the
Yeah.
point is, there's a lot of pressure, right, behind how these organizations run and how they control, market dynamics in a way, right? So, um, not good or bad. Again, nothing good or bad about that. Just from the standpoint of the way the money rolls into the ability to deliver real value, right, is not easy, right? It's not easy, and so that's a life lesson that I'm still learning right now. I'm taking a few blows to the head myself, right? Just because, taking risk, right? When you take full risk on populations or take risk on performance, um, there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that go into full capitated sort of global risk for populations. And the market hasn't, with the data and analytics and insights, it hasn't been built that way. It's built on a fee for service kind of pay me for the stuff I do kind of
Yeah.
mentality. And so that's my biggest learning, and it's kind of the biggest challenge that I face today to get fully fully home, right? Fully home on what I've been building for 27 years. That last mile is a mother, I'll say.
Yes.
His mother.
How about and I'm sure you have an interesting take on this. I mean, living in America, free market capitalist society, how
Yeah.
has embracing our free market system benefited the business model? And I mean, that's really the question. But in your industry, you're kind of overlapping, like you were talking about the payers and the government, and so there's
Yeah.
more involved. But just the capitalist free market system, how has that benefited or
Yeah.
impacted, or how have you
Yeah.
embraced that in the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know your background a little bit too, and my back. Look, I'm a true blue capital guy, right? I mean, I'm
Yes.
American. I'm a true blue. Like, yes, this is great. We got the greatest opportunity in the world, right? For all these reasons that we've just talked about for the last little bit. So
Uh-huh.
just let me start with that, right? So that's
Yeah.
my baseline. Like, I'm all about like value. I'm all about accountability. I'm all about freedom. I'm all about that, right? That's me, right?
Yes.
And taking on big challenges for big opportunities, right? And being
Right.
accountable, right? So all that's my baseline, just to put that in. So the challenge, right? So it's funny. This is a great question for me because I'm a free market guy, right? For sure. I think the challenge, right? We have when you deal with something that's 20% of GDP, right? And you
Right.
have a broken system that pipes the money, in my opinion, in the wrong places, and it's very nefarious and it doesn't
Yeah.
create what it's intended to do, right? When you talk to a lot of players in this market, they talk about their business case and their model and how great it is and all this crap. What they never talk about, or very rarely, is they talk about the client experience, right? They don't talk
Yes.
about the clients at all. It's amazing. Like you're dealing with health services or health, and people
Right.
very rarely talk about the client or the client journey. They always talk about how they're going to affect their piece of it and whatever. So back to your question, as I've matured, and even today, like I'm frustrated because of the way that the players play, right? I mean, there's a lot of intractable challenges when you're dealing with a lot of money, right? When you deal with
Hmm.
1 trillion, there's a lot of people that want their hands on it, right? And so how it's delivered, right, to the line, to close as it gets closer and closer to the client, right? It's more and more pilfered, right? So
Huh.
you take a dollar, like this is perfect because I'm a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer. It's my money. There's no government money, right? It's my money, right? And
Yeah.
I'm pissed because I want my money to do the right things in the world. When my
Right.
money goes up to the government, $1 of mine, and it goes through this whack-a-mole system of healthcare and Medicare and then the payers and then everybody else and everybody's taking their, it ends up like the amount that's left to kind of serve the client is like 12 cents.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. And that's why it's
Totally.
so bad, right? It's
Hmm.
so bad. Our cost is, you know, as a company, as a country, there's lots of stats on this, but the one everybody likes to tout is as a first world country, there's lots of first world countries, right? We spend twice as much as anyone else, twice as much as any other first world country with no better outcomes in mortality and morbidity, right? So we spend
Unbelievable.
twice as much. And you're
Huh.
talking again, 5 trillion, $4 or $5 trillion is spent on this. And we should be spending about 2 or 3, and we're getting crappy outcomes. Sorry. So we get
It's
bad
okay.
outcomes. So
Yeah.
so back to, so that's kind of, that's the problem, right? And so, that's what we gotta fix that, right? We gotta
Yeah.
fix
Oh, for sure. How about just kind of looking back, what decision or actions would you say have been most pivotal in your success so far?
Yeah, I think those transition periods, because I think there's two ways. How do you define success, right? I mean, again, not to get philosophical, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
get philosophical here, um, but it's really about how do you define success. And for me, and for at least the way I think of the world, right? I want to do really great work and I want to make a lot of money. We want both, right?
Hmm.
I'm greedy. I want both. I don't want one or the other. Usually people are
Right.
like, I can make a lot of money or I can do good work. It's one or the other. But I like the genius of the
And
And I want to do really good work and I want to make a lot of money, right?
right.
So that's kind of that's that's where I'm at, right? I mean, so I think that's how I think about it. And anyway, so I'll stop there. I mean,
No, that's great. How about you can maybe answer this in two different ways, or maybe it's the same, but like what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, whether it's just starting a business in general or trying to affect change in that healthcare system, or doing what you've done where you've found this thesis and you want to pursue it, what kind of advice to the next person that has a thesis would you give them?
Yeah. Let me go back. Just I'll come back to this for a second, but
Sure.
back to your questions two ago about, we were talking about sort of, you asked me a great question. I went on for a bit and I didn't answer it completely. So back to the capitalist question, right? Or
Yes.
capital. And I went kind of almost there home. But so back to why it was a good question for me is I've thought about like universal healthcare, right? People talk
Yes.
about that, right? And I talk about single
Sure.
payer. I don't want the government to do it. I wish there was a single payer that we could trust, right? And we could actually get to single payer because there's so much where I was going is there's so much that's taken out of the dollar before it's very inefficient because there's so many parties that kind of touch it.
Yeah.
So I've kind of I say that with kind of my tongue in cheek because I'm like I hate saying that, but I'm kind of like I almost I mean because of what I've seen and what I know is how do you break this $1 trillion uh you know backdoor club, you know what I mean? That's kind of
Yeah.
hanging on to all the money. And so if you want to really, it's because it's got to be an industry reformation, right? And so that
Totally.
it's really hard. So I just wanted to cap that off with I've been contemplating in my mind, like how do we do it? How can that question be thought of differently because of what I've seen? And not just what
Yeah.
I've seen. I mean, this is what people that really know the system know what I'm talking about, right?
Uh-huh.
There's no argument, right? It's just a matter of how do I if I'm monetizing it over here really well, why do I don't want it to change, right? I don't want it to change. It's good the way it is, right, for
Yeah.
me. So I think I just want to cap that off. So I've been open-minded to like, I don't want to have, I definitely don't think it's universal healthcare, like from the standpoint of the government,
Yeah.
but somehow there's got to be enough breakthrough and innovation so that starts to throw away some of those old intractable methods and models because otherwise it's just never gonna it's gonna be a hard pull to change it, right?
Yeah.
Healthcare, there's this idea like healthcare is a right or no, it's not a right, and should we pay for it? And we just keep paying more and more for it. It's gonna be 20. I bet in my lifetime we'll see healthcare get to 30% GDP in spend.
Jeez.
Yeah. So anyway, so I just wanted to finish that off because I didn't really give you my final
Yeah.
answer on what I thought. But it's a great thing that people need to decide. I like what's happening as far as the inefficiency and the focus on change, but it's way bigger than that even, right? It's just a really big convoluted problem for payment. And again, I'll just be clear. It's really payment reformation has to
Yeah.
be different, right?
Yeah.
And there's people are trying. Like there's been tries. Like it's not that people are trying to like the Centers for Medicare, the CMS, right, and things of the government where they've tried innovative models. They've tried in Medicare Advantage is a big push towards risk and towards pushing risk down to providers and giving people entrepreneurs a chance to play, right? And then there's winners and losers and it's kind of trying to happen, but it's not all the way there. So anyway, that's just
Yeah.
wanted to close that off.
Do
So
you
then back to your
think,
question about what do I would suggest to entrepreneurs is, and maybe, a couple of things that first come to mind is, um, I think a couple things. One, you better be ready to be resilient, right? You
mm,
be resilient. Be ready to
yes.
be ready to be like it's not just yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, let me go start up something, right? Unless it's, again, depending on what kind of scale you're talking about, right? If you want to start up, something in your garage and you want a good lifestyle business, that's great, right? But if you really want to make something more meaningful or bigger, I guess, in the market, make sure you go in with eyes wide open. And I would say make sure you get a great group of advisors around
Mm,
you. Don't ever underestimate the power of the people around you, right?
yes.
You have to have coaches. We all think, a lot of entrepreneurs like me, we're kind of dumb, naive, and arrogant, right? When we start, right? I know how to do it better than anybody else. I think it's going to
Uh-huh.
work. And, I know what I'm doing and that's going to be great. So, that's great, right? You want the confidence, you want the passion, but make sure you get really smart peer people around you. It doesn't mean you have to listen to everything they say and do everything they say, but you want that debate across your network. So again, go in with eyes wide open, be really resilient. Make sure you have a great group of people around you. You can't underestimate that. That's super, super important. Make sure you don't get drunk on your product or get drunk on on this big idea before you get the little idea.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, people talk about this in venture and they all like to use fancy words. There's a whole nother vernacular for
Yeah.
venture. Like you need a beachhead, we need a beachhead strategy, and meaning, put something on the ground, right? Build some scale a little bit, right? Give your thesis a little wind and give it a little air before you want to build the next fandango part of it, the next part, the next part. Don't get drunk on your product is the point. Get some revenue, get some stability, drive some revenue, right? Give yourself some wind, right? So that's the third. The fourth, I would say, be very, very mindful of being capital hygiene, I'll call it, right? We all, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, you go like, oh, I raised $5 million. Look at me. Woohoo. Yeah, but you gave up 80% of your company and you're going to be
Right.
totally knocked out.
Yes.
85% of entrepreneurs are knocked out within the first 3 years. 85% of founders, 85% of the CEOs of their own companies are knocked out within their first 3 years, right?
That's unbelievable.
So,
Yes.
so don't ever think for a minute you're the woman or man on the top of the heap if you take capital. So if you take outside capital, you better be very, very um, surrounded with people that know the game of capital because capital it's great. So I'm not saying anything, we need venture capitalists, we need private equity groups, we need growth equity groups, we need SPACs, we need public offerings, but don't give if you're really careful and you really believe in what you got and you got something good, really make sure you're sensitive to your capital and your spend, et cetera, et cetera. Right? I'd say that's really, really important as well. So those are 3 or 4 things that really riff off the top of my head that matter. And then the final one, which we talked a lot about to start with, is really manage your people, make your hires. You cannot hire B and C people, as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned. If you hire B's and C's, you're going to get D's and F's, right? So
Right.
you got to hire A's. And no matter how you need to get a few, not everyone has to be perfect, right? But you need to make sure your critical hires, especially early, are are really going to be able to stand with you in the fire and work through and grind, right? The challenges of building something from scratch.
Yeah. Oh, very, very good. Going back to your previous one about just the healthcare system and capitalism, I mean, do you think it's going to take, and do you think that it'll take this, and do you think this could happen where it's almost, and it could happen with this administration, where it's like a baseline budgeting kind of idea where we just scratch the whole thing and then let's rebuild it and justify each piece in this healthcare system, and then it'll take a total reboot, if you will, to really fix it rather than just like trying to piecemeal and put patches here and there. Number one, do
Yeah.
you think that's could solve it? Number two, do you think that's possible that we could have a total reboot? And
Yeah. Yeah, if you were closer to me, Kip, you'd know like I speak a lot about these types of things. This is
yes.
this is a great question because I actually profess this what I'm gonna say, right? So I've thought a lot about this. I've been doing this for my whole career now in seniors. Again, I'm more in the senior space, not the whole commercial
Uh-huh.
healthcare space, but in seniors, and it's all relevant, right?
Yeah.
But I've spent my life with a lot of smart people around me. I've got all the fancy names of people that it doesn't matter, right? Who your names drop. But I've talked and listened and been a student and been a collaborator, et cetera. And when I think about your question, when I answer that, I'm like, I do believe there needs to be to really make it work, right? To really make it health, not care. Nobody wants
Right.
care.
Right.
Health, right? Really help people be accountable to their own health and help them do that and get out of this unbelievable spend cycle that we have. It needs a complete reboot, not incrementalism, right?
Right.
Incrementalism is to your point. I talk about this. I said we're just dying by 1,000 slices, right? You don't
Yes.
you don't ever reboot when you go from 6% of GDP to 8% to 10% to 12% to 14 to 16 to 18. Obviously, something's wrong. You
Yes.
might be wrong, right, in the
Yeah.
system, right? And so it's kind of like I don't know if you've read Atul Gawande. There's a book out there called Being Mortal, and he's done some things called
No.
testing, testing, testing. He's a writer, but one of the things he talks about is basically another industry way back in the day around the turn of the century. America, what people did when they moved west, and we were, more, obviously just coming to this country and going west and stuff is what people spent a lot of money on was food, right? The cost
Mm.
of food was expensive back then. So people were spending a lot of their money on food, right? Because we just needed to eat, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
so farming was a little bit backwards, right, back then. And so he tells this story of been testing about the situation where cost of food and cost of agriculture was really high, and we didn't really have any good methods or any sort of good ideas, and we were just sort of doing it the way we thought. And we were so anyway, long story long, there was a person that actually went out and started going to different countries and learning the methods that were being done all over the world, and
Huh.
then brought them back to the US to the farmers that were out in there in the local farming. And again, this is 120 years ago. And they started using, more thoughtful, sophisticated strategies for how to crop and how to get better yield. And lo and behold, everybody said, no, that's stupid. That's dumb. Right? We're not going to do
Uh,
what the Chinese do. We're not going to do, we
yeah.
don't care about that. They don't know what they're doing. So anyway, long story long, he finally got some people to adopt those strategies. And lo and behold, it was amazing. And that's what happened with, obviously, we have really kind of efficient farming today. But the point being is where I'm going with this is by doing there needed to be a total reboot in that
Yes.
system, and it drove the GDP from 6, 8, 10 back down to like 2, 4, right? So that's the idea. So to your point about we need to rethink the mess, right? It's a complete mess of how we deliver. And anybody that knows healthcare and the longitudinal, not just, hey, I can go fix, we're really good at fixing stuff. Like we can
Right.
fix your hip, we can fix your heart, we can keep you alive when you're dead. We can do all sorts of amazing things. That's great, 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 great technology. Yes, that's great. But what we haven't done is help people stay healthy, predictable, prescriptive,
Yes.
proactive. Everything is reactive, right? What we pay for in America, healthcare is acute reactive services. Everything, like you don't go to the doctor. You and I don't go to the doctor unless
Right.
we have a problem. I mean, we might do an annual checkup, right, here and there. We don't even know who our general, who our doctor
Right.
is. I don't even
Right.
know. When I grew up in Wisconsin, Dr. Jensen was our family practice doctor. He was
Right. Yeah.
delivered me as a baby and all that crap. After that, Dr. Jensen and I went away to the world. Like, I don't even know who my primary care doctor is. I don't even see them. I don't even know who I have. Like, it's crazy,
Yeah.
right? But back then, it was very familiar. Like, Dr. Jensen would come to our house. He would go to our baseball games. He knew us. He knew me, and he would take
Uh-huh.
care of kind of our family. Now it's complete, very, very surgical. Uh, 15-minute increments with your primary care, and
Yeah.
all this subspecialty and all these services and all this morass of things that we do. But yet it doesn't really connect to who I am and what my goals are
Hmm.
and how I want to live my life. So I'll stop there. But your question is, should it be rebuilt? Yes. Should it be scratched and re-whiteboarded? Yes. And all of us that have been in this, people that are even, I talk to CEOs of hospital systems and CEOs of payers all the time. And they're like,
Uh-huh.
well, yeah, Joel, well, yeah, we know that's what should happen, but it's really hard and blah, blah, blah. And we're making 1.5 million, on my comp, and I don't want to upset the apple cart. You know what I mean? I got
Yeah.
my house out on the lake and I got my boat and everything's great. So
Yep.
nobody wants to do anything, right? Because it's just what it is. If people keep pouring in the money, the government keeps pouring in the money, and our taxpayers pay it, and our GDP goes up, and we just keep funding it,
Yeah.
everything just keeps good. So now the second question is, will it happen? Oh, that's like, yeah, I mean, I'm as I'm getting older, I'm more skeptical. I think there obviously has to be a correction, right? But the market's not ready to deliver health to people, right? For instance, like you might be like, there's a health industry like Lifetime Fitness, and there's fitness
Uh-huh.
people, right?
Yep.
That is completely disassociated with
Right.
like the hospital system or the
Yeah.
what we call the healthcare system in Myanmar. There is no connection between eating well, right, and
Yeah.
the diet, kind of the food industry
Right.
and the health industry. And the health industry doesn't talk to the sick care industry, and the sick care gets all the money, and nobody gets any other money unless it's paid out of pocket. And so
Yep.
the wealthy people can have a trainer and have a nutritionist, and it's great. And the poor people just eat Doritos and don't know any, get food that's crappy, and use the sick care system like their primary care, and use
Right.
the ER and
Right.
ED, at a daily basis.
Yeah.
So it's just ridiculous, right? And we say, oh, the poor people that are not getting health care. Well, they're not getting health, right? They're not getting helped, right? Well, I want to help them, right? Because they're spending the most, right? They're
Right.
spending the most. And so yeah, I have a lot of passion around that, right? And again, that was part of my thesis of I wanted to really create healthcare not just for the concierge medicine, not just for the people that could pay privately back in those old days. I wanted to help the system, right? So that's it's a complex thing. It needs a correction. I hope people like us, all of us, really push. It takes a lot of leadership and a lot of ability to move to a different system, right? I mean, when you have to move to a different system, um, there's a lot of angst in that adoption, and that's
Yeah.
what I fear, right? That's what I fear. When you're dealing with you're not dealing with millions or hundreds of millions, you're dealing with a trillion. So when you deal with trillions, I mean, to move that battleship, um, will take a lot of effort.
Yeah. No, well said. Yeah. I do think we may be at a moment in history where this can happen, but and it's hard to imagine if it doesn't happen here with this group in charge that it will happen, but it something has to change,
I
right?
love your optimism. And I'm there, man. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been there for my whole life, and I want to believe that. Um, but the challenge is that it's so entrenched in these
Yes.
different systems that you have to kick a lot of people in the butt, right, to get there.
Hmm.
And I don't know if there's enough people out there that, I mean, I talk to the ones that I believe are the ones, right?
Yeah.
But the problem, this is a really good topic that, maybe we'll just jump into quick. See, the topic so entrepreneurs like myself, right, to really scale, you need money, right? You need
Right.
capital, right? When you think of the capital markets, and again, they're also in a tiff, as you know, right now over the last
Right.
couple of years. It's been tough, right, for everybody. But anyway, who cares? Don't just take it in a macro perspective.
Uh-huh.
Most venture and growth equity firms, right? They want entrepreneurs like me, and again, it's perfectly to my story, so this is relevant. They want me to build a beachhead, build a business case that makes a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
It extracts value out of a system of some sort or monetizes a thesis, right? And then you stay right in that wheelhouse and then you scale it and then you sell it, right? Then you sell
Yeah.
it. Right? So they have a thesis, as you know how they work. They work on management fees and they bring money together and then they build stuff and then they take it to the next level to a growth equity or to a strategic or to a public offering, right? Those are the options, right? That's
Yeah.
just the train of events, right? So where I'm going with this is the money, the capitalists, right? They don't give a shit about changing the world most of the time. They just want to, they know they're really smart about how to extract value out of a
Yeah.
system, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times they will be like, well, look, let's do diabetic services for people, right? We can build a really great business case. There's a lot of money in that, right? There's a lot of people that are overweight and eat like hell and are on diabetes, having problems. So let's just kind of deal with that little fragment, right? But they don't want to deal with all the other like, hey, let's keep them off the diabetic drugs. Let's not do the pharma. Let's not do the
Right.
$1 million surgeries and all this stuff. You know what I mean? Because that's where I make a lot of money. So
Right.
the
I
problem
know.
is
Yeah.
that so it's a nefarious back ass system from the standpoint you have to really understand. And again, the older you get, the more mature you get, the more globally reflective you get. Take me out of it. Take me out of it. I'm just saying, there's the money wants a really clear thesis, a really clear economic model, make a really high profit, and get out, right?
Right.
Within a period of time. What you and I are talking about to change healthcare, right? Really to change the whole world, change the healthcare.
Yes.
Like that is not a 5-year thesis, and that
No.
is you're gonna get your bell rung time and time again, and nobody wants to invest in that because it's the white whale. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, I want to go after the smaller fish. I like tuna. I like to go after those fish. Those I can catch, I can eat, I can be nutritious, and I can
Uh-huh.
the white whale. That Joel, that I love it. I love the idea. Like I've heard this from so many different groups over my years. Like
I'm
Joel, this is the
sure.
right way to do it. This is the right thesis. We love it, but we're scared. It's too big. It's too big, right? So again, I just think that's interesting on your question of like, where the market's driving the opportunity is usually not in solving macro
Right.
problems. It's usually
Right.
solving micro problems.
Yeah. No,
That
very
makes
true.
sense?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to think about, right? And again, entrepreneurs, they're just a lot of times, hey, you're like, hey, I got a really good idea. I want to make money, and I'll go do another deal and another deal and another deal, and that's what happens, and that's great. Not, I love that. That's super cool. It's value and value creation and whatever. But in healthcare, it's a little different because if you just keep winning on the small stuff, right? You keep winning on the
Yeah.
small stuff. you don't change anything.
Right.
You basically promote it, right? And then
Right. Right.
it's so complicated, it's so convoluted that to your point, that's why I believe you have to just scrap the whole god darn thing and say,
Uh-huh.
okay, really, do we really want people to live in a sick care system? Should we really reward poor outcomes and poor health, right? That's what we reward because
Right.
we pay for sick care, and what we reward is sick care. So therefore, the incentive is to be sick. Like I
Right.
want people, and the last thing I'll say about this, because you got me on a riff.
Keep going. Keep rolling.
No, but I talk to a lot of people as I said, like I'm very connected in the national and local markets, and I won't name any names, obviously, but when I talk to like hospital CFOs and hospital CEOs, because I'm like, hey, like you're the healthcare system, let's work together, like let's partner, let's build better health for people. And again, I'm being dramatic here in a sense
Yes.
because it's not always the case. But I've heard out of the mouths of these people, look, Joel, we love that idea, but I've got all this debt on this infrastructure. I got a hospital, I got a helicopter pad, I got all this crap, and I need to
Yeah.
pay debt on it. And I can't have people not using my services. My services is what I get paid for. So I need heads and beds.
I
I
believe
need
it.
people in the hospital. So my motive is not to keep people healthy. My motive is not to keep people out of my building. I am a God. That's how I make money.
Right.
So how perverse is that, right? And that is the truth.
I believe
That is
it.
the truth.
100%.
And I've talked to just recently, even in this market, people, and they're like, we don't want to do population health. We love the idea, but we can't. It's just too hard. The payment reform is not available for us. We don't see it clear enough. And so we want to go away from it and we want to go back to heads and beds. And our strategy for this year is to basically do 100 more surgeries at our surgery center this year. That's the strategy. Let's
Yeah.
do more surgeries and let's do more crap to people. And the more broken they are, the more crappy they are showing up to our doorstep, the more money I make, baby.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
know.
utilization, more stuff. I can do more MRIs, more testing, more drugs, more this, more that. I mean, seriously? And then again, we forget like who the hell are we serving? These are our moms and dads. These are our grandpas and grandmas. These are people we love. These are me and
Right.
you in a few years, you know?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
holy crap, are we you guys like really? And so it's really sad, right? I mean, I could go into a deep depression. I mean, just thinking about it, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it's like, really? I mean, that's what we're going to do? And so back to what you said, it will take a lot of leadership, Kip. It'll take a lot of leadership, a lot of bold leadership for people to step out and say, enough's enough. And I'm not saying we're not doing that because we are in some areas, you know. I know what you're talking about and
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that side. But at the same time, there's a lot of depth in that perverse system.
Oh, I believe it. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, getting towards the end of our time here. How
Sure.
about a couple more questions?
Sure.
How are you working to build a lasting legacy through LifeSpark and through your business ventures?
Yeah,
Or how do you think about that?
I think about it two ways. One, I always think about the stories that we deliver that our people are delivering every day, and I don't mean
Mm,
that like simply like the legacy is amazing when you see people that have been on a train wreck on that journey of that roller coaster of healthcare crisis, and you get them off, and families and the clients are like, I, I can't even express the thanks and the gratitude and how this has changed our life, right? Mom is doing this again, or mom is doing that now. Or even in a palliation situation, like mom died peacefully and well, and we're
yes.
so thankful for that, you know, and your people and the spirit and the truth and their intent is unbelievable. So the legacy for me is twofold. One is those just don't go away from me no matter what. I take that to heart, right? Because I can feel great about that, right? And I feel great about that from twofold. One, I feel great about that as a leader. Not It's not my legacy, it's the legacy of what we've done together with this team, but it's like we really made a difference there. And then seeing the people that are I mean, right outside my office here, all these people that are working their butts off. Like we work super hard, right? I
Uh-huh.
know we're working harder than most of the sick care enterprises, right? But watching them grow and learn and see and mature their thinking around some of the things you and I talked about today, and
Yeah.
then to deploy it and to see things happen that you're like, oh my God. Like for me now, it's like when I see people do stuff that's really cool, I'm like, holy crap, that's amazing. I'm like, I never
Uh-huh.
even thought of that. So as an entrepreneur, you get to become kind of watching entrepreneurs, right? And so I think
Yes.
really cool to see other people grow. For me, that's just really, really, really cool. And it's not just like, hey, yay, people grow, and like that's great. And then the final thing, which is the big thing, right, is I really do, I really do believe, right? Either we do or we don't, right? It's not we don't try. We either do or we don't, right? We
Right.
we we slay the white whale. The white whale of you, what you and I are talking about, I'm in this senior space and I'm trying to, I'm intentional about putting it all in, right? I'm all in, right? Either I win or lose, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
this space. But I want that white whale to be, that white whale needs to go down. And that white whale is what you and I are talking about. That has to be scrubbed. He has to go bye-bye, right?
Uh-huh.
You have to get the white whale out of the system because that sucker is old. He's cantankerous. He can take money blows, many harpoons.
Yeah.
Like that whale, like I want that, my best feeling, right? When I'm on my time to pass into something else, right? Is like, hey man, like this group are together with many others, not just LifeSpark. I mean, this is going to take a lot more. Like I would love to work with the government directly, right? I would
Uh-huh.
love to work with, those people that we're talking about, right?
Right.
I want to be there. I want to be the czar of like Medicare and Medicaid, and I want to
Yes.
work there. In fact, we sent a message to them. We actually, one of our employees just sent a message to Doge and to the government. We just sent an email just
That's
like two
awesome.
days ago on this issue.
Amazing.
So anyway, we actually did that. So that's really is to scrape and to recreate a method for people to follow and to learn from and to make it better, right? I mean, we just want to be a change agent. So for me, that's my legacy is to say, you know what? Those guys, Leisberg, they really kicked the teeth in on. They got their teeth kicked in many times, but they kept digging, and they were there at the end to make this new thinking, this new belief. Like it wasn't dumb and it wasn't undoable. They kicked it in to create a path for a lot of us to follow. And so that to me is what I think would be most satisfying, right? As somebody that gives a crap about how we deliver services to people in America and beyond.
Yeah, someone's got to be courageous. It's like, why
Yeah,
not us?
exactly. If what do I
Right?
say? If not us, who? If not
Right.
us, who? Right? Because there
Yes.
isn't many who's out there that are willing to
No.
go through the bull that you need to get to a more sustainable business case that's valued for value, right? I mean, the value that's being created is amazing with what our people are doing. It's just a matter of how do you monetize it. And
Yeah,
that's what we fight with. That's my biggest everyday challenge is how do I
for sure.
monetize the value that we create and get paid for true value versus, because what's hard, right? And it's hard. Like, how do you get reimbursed for keeping people well? Like, hey, I'm going to pay you a
Right.
million dollars for keeping people well. Like, how do I actuarial a rising risk, right?
Yeah,
Here's this
right.
person that's going to spend $1 million. We think they're going to spend, but will somebody pay you a half a million to keep the million away? No,
Right.
no, because I make $1 million. If I'm that entity,
Yeah,
I'm not going to get out of the way of that train wreck. I'm going to make $1 million. So the ability for people to work in this field and to work in this over longitudinal perspective, there's so many things that are broken, which you and I don't have time to get into today. If we were talking just about healthcare, I'd get into
uh-huh.
specifics about how how the model really works, right? Because I have a strong belief around and I think clarity around the malfeasance in the total system
Mm-hmm.
on how a dollar rolls. I use that analogy where a dollar rolls down to the client level, right? And I
Yeah,
could show you where those dollars get pilfered, right, out of the system and what needs to change. But anyway, that's just a little bit more deep on kind of the question there. But
for
that's
sure.
what I believe.
No. All right, final question.
Yep.
Your personal, you actually even mentioned this earlier, your personal definition of success. You can take it any way you want. How do you define success for yourself?
Mhm. Man, I think I mean that's an interesting question. I think for me is, first and foremost, I want to be a good dad. I want to be a
Mm,
good,
yes,
husband, and I just want to be a good
yes.
human, right? I want to be able to work. We all know when we go off track. We know when we're being a little bit squirrely with our intent, right? I mean, intention is
Yes.
important, right? We can say, "Oh yeah, I'm the best guy in the room," right? And it's like, "Yeah, right, but you're doing this and this. So come on, let's
Uh-huh.
let's be honest." So I think for me, what success is that I can stay and to be a good human, right? I mean, and always have my attention, right? I make mistakes. I'm human. I make I'm a sinner, right? I have
All
problems,
right.
but
Yes.
but at least I know when I do, right? And I really want to be that person that is honest about and transparent about my own vulnerability and my own self, right? And learn and grow with people that I love and I care. So that's just kind of the personal side of it, right? I think the other side of success is kind of what we talked about is I want to be a good leader and a good steward to an industry that's really broken. I
Hmm.
want to see I want to see the people that I care a lot about, these seniors and these families, right? I want to, because it trickles down. It has such a trickle down effect to grandbabies and kids. And,
Yes.
you know, I mean,
Yes.
by having our seniors served well and have them not be scared and fearful and broken to pieces in later in life is horseshit, right? So I think, you know, what success is that we do create, you know, a lot of, at least at a minimum, we raise a lot of questions to what's going on out there and to provide some optimism, right? Like you said, you're an optimist. I'm an optimist. I'm a half
Yeah.
full guy for sure,
Yeah.
and provide will for other leaders to follow and to dive into these opportunities with more focus on outcome than on their own just business case too, right? I want people to be greedy and I want them to do good work and make a lot of money. I'm all
Uh-huh.
about making a lot of money and creating a lot of value, but I'm also, you can't do it. I think it's bad for us to set the success factor to your question. People,
Hmm.
when you ask people, "Hey, how do you define success?" It's gonna be like, "Hey, I'm gonna be a millionaire someday," right? You know, everybody wants to monetize their perspective of or worth. Like, "Oh, look at that guy, he's a beast." You know, look at her, that gal. "Oh, look at how what she did. Look, she's a multi." But yeah, she might be a horrible person, right? She might
Right.
have
I know.
taken
Right.
advantage of the system, and yeah, she's a freaking mogul. She's a successful business person, but she committed suicide, you know, because she's
Right.
terrible. She knows she's a terrible human being, you
Yeah.
know, or whatever. I mean, so I think we just have to create enough, and this is what you do too, Kip. I think in your messaging and such as,
Yeah.
yeah, like we're all about like enterprise, free market, growth, scale. But with our young minds, let's not get duped into thinking that, you know, because I served, you know, I was successful because I made $1 million and that made my father feel good about me. You know what I mean?
Right.
The whole lineage of like, hey, I
Yes.
divine all my success on the monetary side. So with that
Uh-huh.
said, I'll stop there. But it's a great question. It's one that I think we all have to keep asking ourselves over and over, right? You always have to get
Right.
up in the day, and we should be asking because it changes over
It
time,
does
right?
change
As
over
you
time.
mature, it
Yes.
changes. It's not static at all. So I think it's really important to keep asking that question, and I'm glad you asked me that question.
Oh, very good. Well, Joel, this has been fantastic. This has been, I mean, exhilarating, informative, exciting. I really want to thank you so much. This has been a fantastic honor to have you on the show. So thank you.
Yeah, Kip. Well, just thanks for the opportunity, right? It's always fun to talk to somebody that has a lot of energy and passion, and thanks for giving me the platform. And I hope it creates some opportunities for people to think differently, right? That's all, right? It gets
Right.
them to
Yes.
think, right? Everything's about provocation for thought because we all make our own choices, and that's a beautiful thing, right? So thanks for the opportunity, and you know, again, I hope all of you out there just really dig deep and stay clear with your intention and do great things in the world. So thanks again, Kip.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, and we'll share your name and contact info and not contact info, but like socials and things and LifeSpark in the show notes so people can reach out to LifeSpark and you. And but again, thank you so much. This has been fascinating, and our audience is just going to eat this up. So thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, you bet.
Bye-bye.
Oops.